Hello everyone, and this is chapter 4 of the Introduction to Houdini series. And this chapter is on how to create digital assets. Now, the first question that comes up is what exactly is a digital asset? So, if you remember the first lesson that we had done, and I had spoken about different types of or different ways of creating geometry, and what I had mentioned was that you can actually take a procedural system and then eventually convert it to a parametric system. So which is like, let's say we have this, which is our table, and what we want to do is we want to just collapse it down into like a single node and just expose a few simple parameters that will allow me to control this entire structure without having to see all of this. And that's effectively what a digital asset is. It's sort of like you are converting your node structure into like a reusable plugin, okay, which you can then take to another machine, like another copy of Houdini, or like if you are a senior developer and then you want to build certain tools that will make life easier for the juniors, or like just to get the process faster. So that's effectively what a digital asset does. Now, if you're coming from something like Softimage, then ICE allows you to do stuff like that. I would assume like Espresso in Cinema 4D would also allow you to do something along those lines. But yeah, that's effectively what a digital asset is. So what we're going to do with this lesson, it's not going to be a very long lesson because this is not an overly complicated process. It doesn't really require any amount of coding or programming. It's just connecting, a few parameters here and there. That's effectively it. So we're going to take this entire table and then convert it to a digital asset. And that's basically what we're going to do. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is after we have created our table is we need to decide how many parameters do we require to control this. So if we look at it, then what we want to be able to control is we want to be able to control the length and width of the table. We want to control the leg height. So those are the main three that you want to control. Then a couple of additional things is you might want to control the thickness of the table and the thickness of the legs. Okay, so that's effectively what we want to control. Now, of course, you can go more complex than that. Like maybe if we bevel the sides of the table, then you want to control beveling. Or if we round the table sides, then maybe you want to control that. So you can do stuff like that as well. But yeah, right now, I think those 5 parameters should be more than enough. So how do we get started? So firstly, we want to create our 5 parameters. So which is pretty much like, again, like if you use After Effects, then After Effects has that control, like you can create a slider or like a dummy slider or a dummy, like rotation thingy. So that's effectively what we want to do. We want to create some dummy parameters that we can use to control, everything from a single location. So what I'm going to do is press tab and take something called as a null. Okay, so a null is an empty object. Okay, like if I click on this, there's nothing there. Okay, it's just from a Mac standpoint, you get something like a dummy. This is not even a dummy. This is just empty. Yeah, dummy you can still sort of see. It's not renderable, but you can see it in the viewport. The null you can't even see in the viewport. It's just a placeholder. Like you can plug it in anywhere you want. It's not going to do anything, okay, because there's nothing in there. So we're going to keep it separate, or you can keep it at the end of this, like either ways is fine, but let's keep it separate. Like it doesn't matter. And let's call it controls. Okay. Okay. So what you need to do is you need to first of all create, let's give it some color as well, just so that we can see it. Yeah. Okay. That's bright enough. Okay. So we need to create the 5 parameters that we want. Okay. So when you select it, now here's the thing. You can do this on a null because a null is empty. So it's easy to find it, but you can do it with any node that you want. Okay. Like every node will give you the same functionality that you're getting with the null. So the null isn't anything special. It's just that because it's empty, it's easy to track. So what you need to do is you need to click here on this little gear icon and the first option, which says edit parameter interface. Now, as I said, like this is available everywhere. Like if I select the table size and I click here, this is a transform node. Okay, like we just named it to table size, but it's a transform node. And if I click here, you'll get edit parameter interface. So what the parameter interface does is it's showing you all the various parameters that are available here. So see, you have like a transform, order, you have rotate, you have translate, rotate, scale, like all of the parameters that are available, and you can also add in more if you want. So that's effectively like if you want to customize this node further, if you want to, then you can do that through the parameter interface window. So of course we don't want to. What we want to do is we want to do it on the null. Okay, so click here and come to like select the null and then click here and then take the edit parameter interface, and you will get nothing like this. These are the existing parameters. Like you can see here, it says existing parameters. You can create parameters and the description of those parameters, like what are the controls available in there. So you get a lot of different types of parameters. You can create buttons, you can create a color node. Like if I drop in a color node and click apply, see you have a color node. Okay, if you don't want it, just select it and delete it and press apply again, that will go away. You have a data node. I don't know what that does. There you go, you have a data, so we can get rid of that. So you have like a whole bunch of stuff. You can create a direction vector. Okay, see, so you can create almost any kind of a node that you want. What we want is a float value. Okay, so a float value is a value that goes in decimal places. An integer is a value that only goes 1, 2, 3, 4. A float will go like 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, sort of like that. So an integer is good when you want to do something like segments. Okay, like if you want to control the height segments of a box, then you take an integer value, because you can't get 1.5 segments. You can only get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Okay, so that is integer. But when you want to control the box height, so you want to go 1.1, 1.2, then you take a float. So we'll just take what we want are 5 things as we had seen. So we want the length and width of the table, we want the height of the table, and then the thickness of the table and the thickness of the legs. So I'm just going to take this 1 and 2, just drag 3 and 4 and 5. Okay, so we have 5 values over here. Till such time you don't hit apply, you won't see anything happening here. Okay, so first of all, we need to do 2 things. You need to give it a name. I'm not going to go through any of these because that's not important right now. So I won't unnecessarily confuse you. So we need to give it a name and a label. Okay, the name is what you will see if you do a copy paste. Like when you do a parametric connect, like we had done in the previous class when we did like a paste reference, that is the name. That is the name when you when you're going to code this. Okay, if you use this in coding, this is what you will type. Okay, like if I'm going to code this, it's going to be called parm. The label is just what you see in the viewport. Okay, so the label can be anything. This is the one that you need to remember if you're going to code it. So usually I write fairly small names because it's just confusing otherwise. So let's call this as width, and we'll call it as table width. And then what you also want to do is you want to give it a range. Otherwise by default it goes from 0 to whatever. It will still go from 0 to whatever you want, but it's good to give it a range. Okay, so we can say we don't want to start from 0. Okay, so this is the width. We'll say start at 0.1 and end at 2. Like that's the maximum. That's the maximum draggable value you'll get. Otherwise, you can type in as much as you want. If you don't want to type more, you can lock it. Like you can say lock the upper range so you can't go over 2. Okay, like you can do that. Okay, so this is that. Fine. Now let's do the other thing. So this is length. So let's call it L, and I'll just do a Control C. Control V, and let's call it, yeah. Now the one thing you need to remember is multiple of them can have the same label, but they can't have the same name, because from a programming standpoint, no 2 independent parameters can have the same name. It will cause conflict. Okay, so the names have to be different, but the labels can be the same. But traditionally you want to keep the labels different as well, otherwise you'll be confused. So yeah, so just keep everything different. Okay, and the same thing here. Let's go to 0.1 and 2. Okay, and then we want to do This is the height. So let's call it h. And this is table height. Yeah. And let's do 0.1. Yeah, same thing, 0.1 to 2. I think that should be good enough. Okay, and then these two will be smaller. So this is the table thickness. So let's just call it th. Okay, and we'll do control V, we'll call it table thickness. And let's go to 0.01 to a maximum of 0.5. And the last thing, this will be the leg thickness. So let's call it LH or LT. Okay, and let's call it table leg thickness. And do the same thing, 0.01 to 0.5. Okay, and if we hit apply, you'll see all 5 of them appear, and you can do accept. Okay, and then just let's give it some rough values. So I want the width to be about, like, let's do about that much. You'll get the height here and the thickness and the thickness. So once we have done this, right now it's not doing anything because it's not connected to anything. So what we want to do now is we want to connect it. So the connection is fairly simple. Okay, let's start with the table width. So we can right click, do copy, and then come to the table size, and we want to control the scale X and the scale Z. Okay, so let's take scale X, that is the width, and we'll do paste relative reference. See, so as I said, like that is the name, right? That is like, it doesn't say table width, it just says W because the name was W. Like if I keep the mouse on it, it says parameter is W. Okay, so the top is the label and the parameter name is the name that gets connected when you're typing in code. Now you can also manually type this if you want. So this is parameter L. Okay, so what I can do is I can just come in here. See, the syntax is fairly simple. It says channel, which is ch, and you start the bracket, you do colon dot dot slash, then the name of the node, okay, and then the name of the parameter. Okay, so what I can do is I can just do control C, come in here, do control V, and the length was called L, so I can just type L, and there you go. Okay, so now you have two things that you have set up, and then we can do the rest. So right click, copy parameter, come to leg height, and this is the thing we want to control, which is uniform scale, and do paste relative reference. And we want to control the leg thickness. So right click, copy parameter, which is here, the poly wire. See, this is the thing that is controlling the leg thickness. So paste relative reference, and we can lower it a bit. Yeah. Okay. And then lastly, the table thickness. So copy parameter, which is the poly extrude, and the distance value. See, this is the thickness of the table, and paste relative reference. There you go. So this is done, right? So this is the thickness of the table. So this is now set up. Like I don't need to touch anything in here. I can just come into this place and adjust it, any which way I want to. Okay, so once you've set this much up, the rest is fairly simple. Okay, we need to convert this. We need to first collapse it to a single node, and then we need to save it as a digital asset. Okay, that's basically it. Okay, so select everything, all the nodes, and just press Shift C. Okay, or if you come here, see it says create subnet, like that little box, which is create subnet from selected. Okay, so the shortcut is Shift C. Yeah, so just select everything and press Shift C, and it will just convert to a subnet. Now the rest of it is fairly simple. The first thing we need to do is, your parameters are gone because the parameters have gone inside the subnet. So we need to bring the parameters back, which is pretty easy. What you do is you click in, see now where is everything? If I double click on this, see, this is where everything is. So if you come up here, you'll now you're within geometry 1, you have this subnet, which has more stuff inside it. Houdini has a lot of subnets. Like Houdini has a lot of digital assets. A lot of the tools that you use sometimes are actually digital assets. So you can kind of go inside them, like once you're experienced enough, you can actually go inside them and see how they're built and learn stuff from them. But anyway, so once you've done this much, The first thing is to re-expose those parameters at surface level. So click here again, go to edit parameter interface, and we need to bring those parameters back. So we don't want to create anything new. What you want to do is you want to come here which says from nodes. So click on from nodes, it will show you all the nodes that you have. What we need is inside geometry 1 we are at subnet. Open that and find controls. And open controls and you will find all of your 5 parameters. Okay, so everything from table width to table thickness. Select it and click this button. It will install all of it. Just hit apply. See, there you go, accept. And we have our parameters back. And once you've done this, okay, the second step is to save it. So right click, come to save. Okay, sorry, not save. Come to create digital asset. Okay, it's pretty simple. It's either you can do it here or you can come to assets and new digital asset from selection, but that's too far away. So right click here and say create digital asset. And it asks you what you want to do. So it saves it usually to like the user folder, like users Rohan, that's my name. So documents 16.5 and OTLs. Digital asset is called an OTL, but the extension is a HDA, which is a Houdini digital asset. And the operator label, we'll call it table. And you'll see that it saves it as Rohan underscore table. And hit accept, and it will give you some options. If you want, you can give it an icon if you want. I don't really have an icon for it. Like sometimes you can find an icon for it. Like you can make an icon if you want to do that. Yeah, there's nothing, forget it. Anyways, so you can give it an icon, that is the label. You have other stuff, like if you want to give it some help, you can type some help for it. If there's additional code in there and input outputs and extra stuff, you don't need to worry about any of this right now. Okay, once you're done, just hit accept and you're done. Okay, and then I can actually delete this, and if I press tab and I type table, and there you go, you have table. There's your table, and those are your controls. And if you want to find it, if I just open up my search window and I can just do see, there you go. So you type in Rohan underscore table.hda, there it is. Like if I do open path, and see, there's my digital asset. And if I want, I can copy this and take it with me to another copy of Houdini and put it in the same path, and Houdini will automatically install it. So like if you want, I can close this now. If I close Houdini and restart it, you'll still have it. Like it's not for this session. It is now saved within Houdini. Okay, so we restarted Houdini, and then if I create a geometry, okay, and let's call it table, and I can jump in here and I'll delete this and we'll create the table. See, there you go, you have your table. And what you can also do is you can store this, you can save this to the shelf. Like you just take it and drag drop it over there to the shelf. That's basically it. And so the next time if I want, I can delete this, I can just click there, it'll make a table. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. And yeah, so that's basically, it's not particularly complicated. Okay, and then if I press tab, I think if I come to geometry, okay, or if I just type table over here, see, it's actually stored that. Because it's accessing the shelf, so you can actually say access table. But yeah, that's essentially it. So it's not overly complicated. It can get overly complicated. Like as your digital assets get more and more complex, things can become complicated. But at a basic level, it's fairly simple. And it really helps in the long run. Like if there is stuff that you do on a regular basis, you can save them as digital assets, and then just, the next time it becomes easy to do that. So this is creating a full object, but it can also be a set of, operations. Like maybe you need to import a geometry and then you need to chop it in half and reduce the poly count, okay, to 50%, something like that. So it's sort of like you want to create a digital asset of that, you can create a digital asset of that. It's sort of like you're doing actions in Photoshop, okay, but more than that. But yeah, so next time you import a geometry, you can just create this, you have your asset ready, you can just apply it, and your life is much more simpler. You don't need to redo the same thing over and over again, which is basically what you create digital assets for. So anyway, so that's essentially it. So with the next lesson, we will continue with procedural modeling, because that is, the most important thing you need to sort of understand. Like most people, you want to sort of jump right into doing like, dynamics and visual effects and stuff like that. But the strength of Houdini comes from its ability to procedurally generate stuff. Once you understand that, the rest of it is just, the rest of it is simpler, or well, not simpler, but it'll help you understand other areas better. Okay, so the next lesson is I'm going to recreate something pretty old. Like there was an older lesson on how to make like a spiral staircase. So that's what we're going to do, because again, it'll help us cover quite a few topics and also do a little bit of math. So yeah, so the next lesson we'll start creating like a spiral staircase. Okay, and once again, if I hope this was clear, because it's a shorter lesson, but it is important. Like this is very, very important, like how to create digital assets in Houdini. So I hope it was clear. And as usual, if you have any questions regarding this, or anything in general, you can write me an email, or message me on Vimeo, or message me on Twitter, whatever is preferable to you. And that's basically it.